All right, guys, let's do my June monthly reading wrap up. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Theo. Today, I just wanted to do my monthly wrap up for June and let you guys know how my reading month went. I read 5 books. One of them was actually a short story out of the Stephen King collection, but all in all, I read 5 books and a total of 2,100 pages, which is slightly on the lower side. I had a bunch of 4 stars. I don't think I had a 5-star. I don't think I had anything less than a 4-star, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. The first book I read in the month of June was The Body, and I read it out of this Stephen King collection, Different Seasons. It's one of the short stories in here. It's almost 200 pages, so I considered that a book for the purposes of the count. But yeah, this one was excellent. It's one that I've obviously heard a ton about. It's one of his more famous short stories. It was adapted into the movie Stand By Me, which you probably have seen. This one was excellent. As I mentioned before, it was a taste of what Stephen King does expertly, which is, childhood, middle America, coming of age story, friendships, youth, and the way that, a child interprets the world and what's important to them and how they think and how important those formative years can be and how they can, mold you as a person. And so this one was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. It makes me want to watch the movie, which I haven't seen in many years. But yeah, this one was really good. I wanted to read a little bit of Stephen King. I didn't have time to squeeze in The Stand in the last couple months. So as I mentioned before, when I get an itch for some Stephen King and I don't quite have time for a full novel as I'm making my way through his catalog, I'll just go ahead and fit in some of these short stories. By the way, if you guys hear a little bit of background noise, I have a fan going on because it's summer here and it's really, really hot. So instead of me sweating all over the camera, I just have a fan on. Anyway, the next book I read in the month of June was none other than Legends and Lattes. This one I wasn't really sure if I was going to try to fit in. I wasn't sure if I was going to read it or not. It wasn't a huge priority. I heard a lot of praise about it. Obviously, it's everywhere on BookTube, but it wasn't really a huge priority. I thought maybe I'd fit this in if I wanted something a little bit charming and cozy, bit of a change of pace, something lower stakes. And I put up a poll on my Instagram basically to see if, that was one that I should read. I think I gave a choice of a couple books and that one won the vote. So I ended up reading it in the month of June and I was really pleasantly surprised. Travis Baldree, as some of you may know, is a narrator for the Cradle series by Will White. And he's a pretty acclaimed narrator. I hear he's very, very good. I haven't heard those books or read those books myself, but he's very well known in that community. And he was actually really impressive as an author. I don't know what else he's written. I think this may very well be his first book. It was self-published, and I hear that UK Tor, I think, has picked this up, if I'm not mistaken. So it was really good. It was just as charming, just as cozy, just as, I hate using the word cute, but just it was cute. It was all those things just as much as everyone has said. And I really liked it. To be honest with you, the first kind of quarter of the book, even the first third, it was a little bit slow to build up. I kind of understood what we were doing. The story picks up with Viv starting a new life, having pulled off the last, big job with her crew. And she's starting this new life. She moves to this nice, quaint little fantasy town by the river. I picture windmills and little cottages and cobblestones and rivers and little shops and a marketplace and that kind of stuff. And she wants to start a new life and start a coffee shop. And that's really what the first quarter to third of the book is. It's this cute kind of evolution of her meeting these people, building some relationships. Even though the relationships are built very quickly, everything feels really organic, which is actually really impressive. And then over the first little bit of the book, they're expanding this cafe, they're adding menu items, they're starting to get some interest, they're starting to build this community of people that are intrigued by this coffee shop, and they're really starting to bring people together. And that's kind of all the first, like I said, quarter to third of the book is. So there was a point where I was like, okay, I get what we're doing. Let's, I wonder where this story is going to go. And then at a certain point, I would say halfway through the book, things just kind of pick up. Everything starts to come together. There's a little bit more intrigue, a little bit more background on kind of what's happening. And we end up getting really bonded to these characters in a way that I was actually very surprised by. I was shocked by the end of the book how much I cared about some of these characters in such a short book. I mean, it's only 350, 380 pages. It was just done very, very well. I don't think you should go into this expecting, a grand fantasy story. I don't think it's marketed that way. It's very smartly marketed as a low stakes, kind of cozy fantasy book. And if you go in with that expectation, if you go in with that mood and you're seeking that aesthetic and that vibe and you're fitting it into all these other, fantasy books that you typically read, then it's going to do exactly what you want it to, and I think you'll be impressed with it. The whole time I was reading, I was just consumed by like the smells and the tastes of, coffee and pastries and all that. It's just the way it's done is really cute, and the way the story unravels and the way these characters are, not just the main characters, but just the ancillary characters too, are developed is really quite well done, I think. And there came a point near the end of the story that had my jaw on the floor. Like there was a point in the story where something happens and I could not believe that this just happened. I couldn't believe that the author wrote this. And I was just like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? Because we have this huge buildup and then something really impactful happens and my stomach just dropped and I couldn't believe what I was reading. And everything has a way of just wrapping up in such a nice little package. It really leaves on a nice note. And I think that what I liked the most about this entire book was just the relationship between two of these characters. If you've heard anything about this book, or you've read it, or you've even maybe caught a review, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's a relationship that forms with two characters that is quite beautiful, and it's done in a way that feels very organic, very earned, very thoughtful and delicate. It's just the way it was done was actually beautiful. It was handled with a tremendous amount of care and emotion, and really, dare I say, the romance in this book landed for me in a way that I mean, if you told me that it would, I would probably not believe you, but it really landed with me, and it just the whole story hit a lot of notes that, were deliberate, and I think were done very, very well. Anyway, it was smart. It was charming. I was really impressed. I'm keen to see what else Travis Baldree does. And so if you haven't read it yet and you have a little bit of time, go ahead and try it. Another one that I read in June that I'm dragging my feet on a little bit is The Air of Novron. I split this one up because I've been really busy last month into two parts. I read the first part called Wintertide. I did mention before in a past video that this was the first kind of 5-star component of the Rhaenyra Revelations series for me. This was where Royce and Adrian were solidified as one of the best duos, one of my favorite relationships in fantasy. And the entire book was high stakes, a lot of revelations, a lot of emotional moments. This is probably the first time in the entire series where Hadrian and Royce split up for an extended period of time. They end up kind of coming back together, and like I said, the stakes are high. There's a lot of things happening. The pacing is great. The writing is still good. It's all of Michael J. Sullivan's typical stuff that I'm impressed with these books, because I really do like them. And because this is positioning us for the end, for a really epic ending from what I hear in Persepliquus, it was a great book. It was a final setup. I can't wait to get into the next part. I'm reading the final part of this final book this month in July, and I can't wait because the way that it left off was just so much happens, so much character developments, lots of good character arcs. And so I can't wait to see where everyone ends up. I really like it. Michael J. Sullivan's become, a favorite for the Rhaenyra stuff for sure. And can't wait to finish that one. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you guys know I'm crazy right now about the Warlord Chronicle. I read book 2, Enemy of God, and it was also a 5-star. It was excellent. I can't tell you guys how much I like the writing. The audiobooks done by Jonathan Keeble are like Oscar worthy. Like if you can give an award for, I don't know if are there awards for audiobooks? If you know, let me know. But this one was so good. There's a bit of a quest in it. Merlin is more at the forefront. Arthur is more involved in this book than he was in the first one. There's mention of a cauldron, which is really the Holy Grail, and I think the cauldron stems from more Celtic mythology, whereas, the Holy Grail is kind of what it evolved into. There's politics and strategy and treachery and battles, more like skirmishes, but still, battles. And there was a moment in this book that made me nearly cry, and I won't spoil anything, but it has to do with a character losing a family member, and it was done so well, not only for the fact that, but particularly for the fact that we get to know these characters so well, and we get to really love some of these characters and get really tied and bonded to them, that their pain becomes our pain. And it was so well done, really impactful, and I got more emotional than I thought I would. We finally hear mention of, the land area that is really Camelot. We hear the word Camelot. We hear about the knights, Arthur's knights at the round table. We finally hear kind of mention of that. We hear all these things from kind of the traditional, legend, but it's done in a very realistic interpretation of all those stories. And I just can't tell you how much I enjoy it. I'm actually reading, I've peeked into Excalibur, which is the third book. I'm reading a little bit. I've read a couple chapters of that. They don't really have chapters. They're kind of just there's different parts and stuff, but really there's no chapters. It kind of just flows. So I've read 30 or 40 pages of Excalibur, and I can't get enough of that book. So right now I'm reading Empire of Silence, and I'm dipping into Excalibur because I just can't wait to finish this trilogy. The last book I read in the month of June was An Echo of Things to Come. This is book 2 of the Licanius trilogy. I can't wait to finish this up. This will be another series under my belt. I'll finish up the trilogy this month in July. This book was very, very good. It wasn't excellent. I wasn't as impressed as I was with the first one. And again, the first one, I was probably generous in my 5-star rating because it was a debut. It was so ambitious. I could tell, the seeds that James Islington was planting. And it was such an ambitious debut that I couldn't help but be impressed. The second book really takes its time to continue to develop characters and expand on the world. And you can tell that it is a middle book. It doesn't quite have the middle book syndrome that a lot of books do, but you can tell that this book really, the purpose of it was to get everyone into the right spot for what will be the conclusion of the trilogy in the light of all that falls, which is the third book. There were a few things that I didn't like. There was another few instances of she let out a breath that she didn't know she was holding. I think the word contemplative silence or companionable silence was used several times in the first book as well as in this book. And it's something that, once you see it a few times, it's just okay, it's a little bit distracting. So some of the devices in here and some of the writing was a little bit cringy, but overall it was actually still digestible. It was still impressive enough. The world is expanded on a little bit. The characters should have been developed even more. I think they fell a little flat. A couple characters have quite impressive arcs, but they're still not as fleshed out as I think they could be. That's just my opinion. I don't exactly know where the third book is going to go. One thing I will say after reading the first and second book now is James Islington is the king of epilogues. The first book has an incredible epilogue that makes you want to just drop everything and get right into the second book. The second book has an epilogue that is probably the best epilogue, best ending or concluding, chapter or couple chapters that I've ever read ever. It is such an impactful moment. And I would say, regardless of what you end up thinking about this book, if you liked it, if you didn't like it, whatever, the journey through the second book to get to the epilogue is totally worth it. So the third book I'm excited to read in July. I can't wait to wrap this one up. Again, this one was pretty good. It wasn't great. I think it could have been a little bit better, but again, it's a middle book. There's a lot that the middle book of a trilogy needs to do, and I thought it did it quite well. It's a very ambitious first series. There's a lot of stuff to unpack. It's a book that you really need to pay attention to, and there are a lot of moving parts. I think that it probably could have been made a little bit more straightforward. There's a lot of things happening, and I don't know if I would necessarily recommend this series to a reader that's not already fairly experienced with fantasy and kind of know what they like, because this one definitely takes some brain power to make sure you keep things in order. There's a lot of time jumping, and that can really put some people off. I thought it was handled about as well as it could have for the purposes of the story that it's telling, but man, it's crazy. Lots of things happen. You really have to have your thinking cap on, and for some people, that sounds like a lot of work. For me, I enjoyed it, but it could have been a little bit tighter, and I'm super, super excited to read the third book and wrap this thing up because I hear the ending is excellent. So this one was very good. Not excellent, but very good, and I can't wait to finish it up. Guys, that is it for me. That is about all I had time to read in the month of June. Not bad, a lot of 4 stars, a couple 5 stars. I can't complain. I got a little bit of Stephen King in there, a little bit of historical fiction, some fantasy, some epic stuff, some standard fantasy. I got a little bit of everything. So let me know what you guys have read in the month of June, and if you guys have tried or read any of the ones that I mentioned. I've been making my way through my watch later list and all my booktube friends and seeing what everybody's read in the month of June. I love monthly wrap-ups. Gives me a lot of ideas for the TBR, which is already expanded and inflated to probably beyond a reasonable size. So anyway, that's it for me, guys. Just a quick monthly wrap up. Hope you guys are doing okay, and I will catch you real soon on the next one.